I'm Sarah King, and I am endlessly fascinated by medical issues and things, especially those of relationships and of the mind. Have you ever been told that you need better boundaries? Well, unless you're Brene Brown, you probably don't even know what a boundary is, or if you even have them, or if you need them. So, let's talk to a psychiatrist who knows what a boundary is and can tell us what to look for when you're in need of better ones. All right, well, I'm here with Dr. Micah Krempasky. And what's your title? What exactly kind of doctor are you?
Well, I am a psychiatrist, and
cool.
I am the chief medical officer for mental health and well-being for WakeMed.
Oh, so you've got a big hat to wear. So today we're talking boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, behind the scenes, we had a little bit of trouble coming up with questions because it's kind of like not nebulous, but it's not as clear-cut as, heart disease. What are the signs? Blah, blah, blah. So explain what a healthy boundary is and why exactly they're important for mental health.
Yeah, I think it feels nebulous because we don't know what boundaries are. That's a big part of the problem. We know when we feel bad. We know when we get anxious, when we're feeling overwhelmed or resentful. We are constantly aware of these things, but we don't know why that happens.
Yeah.
And often if we start digging down, it's because we didn't have good boundaries, because we don't learn those things. We don't know how to say no. We don't know how to really do what's in our best interest. It's constantly give.
Yeah.
Then we're depleted, and we don't know why. That usually goes back to boundaries.
So can you define a boundary? Is there a definition of a boundary?
So boundaries are decisions that you make, choices that you make that determine how you spend your time and your energy.
Okay.
And then they can also go into how you define your own self-worth. And it really in the end goes back to how you feel about yourself and how you value yourself and what you think you deserve.
Oh, wow. That's deep.
Deep, really fast. I mean, let's just dive right in.
I was like, whoa. What are some common misconceptions with boundaries?
Yeah, so I think we as women especially get told that we are not able to make decisions or that we have to be selfless. I think women in America are celebrated to be selfless, always giving.
Yes.
I was just thinking about this on Mother's Day. Mother's Day is such a farce. Right?
Yeah.
So the role of a mother is to take care of everyone. We nurture. And then we have this day called Mother's Day where you think you're going to take the day off and you are going to sit back and you're going to relax and everyone is going to do things for you. And then it all falls apart because your role in life is nurturing and taking care of people. And things fall apart when you don't do that.
Yeah.
So I think we as women have expectations of this is what we do. And so when we find out that, wait, that might be not what I want to do, or that doesn't work for me. Do we have permission to do that? It gets really complicated.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for us to show up as our best for other people if we're not our true, authentic self, if we're not really able to be our best self. And it's really hard for us to say, wait, this doesn't work for me.
Right. That was what I was going to say. I'm thinking about how to define a boundary. And so what I'm gathering from you is that a boundary is when you find yourself wanting to say no.
Yes.
And then a boundary is just allowing yourself to say no and setting up that boundary. I'm not going to do this. Okay. And so I could see why that would be difficult because way back when, when you're a little kid, if you say no and they don't listen to that no, then your no's don't mean anything.
Correct.
So I have an 8-year-old
mm-hmm.
and he says no to me all the time, but he doesn't want to clean his room.
Right.
That's not a boundary.
Right.
Is it a boundary? And am I making him not have boundaries later?
Right. So I think it's so complicated with kids. So if we think about where we learn this, that's what we're doing as children is we're figuring out where our boundaries are. And it really happens in adolescence. I'm in the middle of adolescence right now with my girls. And it is boundary pushing every single day. But they're testing where their boundaries are. How far can I push you before I've gone too far? And they need to do that in a safe environment because where else are you going to learn that? And that's where it falls apart for many of us because as children, sometimes the boundaries are inconsistent or we're told that we are not, that our opinions don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone intends to tell us that, but it just happens. So let's think about cleaning the room. I think that gets complicated really easily. So is that an expectation that was set and how you go about it? And when he says no, then you have to decide what that battle is going to be and talking through that.
Right. Well, for me, I was like, you need to learn how to clean.
Yes.
You don't know how to clean yet. So I took it as a teaching moment.
Yes.
And so that's what we've been doing. But yeah, it's quite complicated. With your adolescents, do you have any examples of them pushing a boundary? What does it look like? How does it manifest in an adolescent?
Oh, yeah. I think I have girls, so adolescent girls is particularly interesting.
Yeah, you had it easy when they were toddlers and like to snuggle
Right.
while us boy moms were out there like dying because they were trying to kill themselves every 5 seconds.
Exactly.
Now
We
it's your
pay
turn.
for it.
Yeah.
Yes, we pay for it in the teen years. So I think it's even a lot about tolerating behavior. So in the adolescent years, hormones are all over the place. People are trying to figure it out. And there's just mood swings every single day all over the place.
Right.
And so a lot of boundary pushing goes with relationships of, I hate you. My life is terrible. And really just being able to ride that with them and continuing to hold the line because they will try every technique possible. So the biggest one is probably social media.
Oh, I bet.
And electronics of trying to figure out what our family value is on that. And I remember one day my daughter had gotten into trouble or she wasn't using her phone. It wasn't helping her. And so I set a limit that like, I need your phone. And she lost it. And it was really, really, really hard for her. And I sat there and I sat with it and I was like, ooh, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah,
like
always
this
the
is
question
so
as a parent.
devastating
Yeah.
to her. So I stuck with it though. We got through the weekend. And at the end of the weekend, she said, Mom, I feel a lot better.
Oh,
I'm really glad that I took a break from my phone. Like it wasn't working for me. And so then I recognized that setting that boundary was really important for her because her little brain was not able to process all that. She didn't have the frontal lobe to be able to
Right.
think through all the consequences and to see everything. But in
Wow.
that moment, she just wanted her needs met
Yeah.
immediately. So that was teaching her a boundary. I set it. We're going to stay consistent with it. And then afterwards, we were able to reflect on, hey, this is why we did this and this is what happened.
So with parents, then it sounds like rules almost.
Yeah, so it can be rules. Rules are definitely boundaries, right? So a rule is a line that you draw in the sand and says, this is how we do it. Boundaries can be softer than that too, about, well, do you want, can we go out for ice cream tonight? Well, that's not a rule. Like, that's a decision. I'm trying to think of something different that would go with relationships. So your kid says, hey, would you like to sit down and watch a movie with me? What if you have a million things that you need to do?
Yeah.
I need to cook dinner. I need to pack lunches. I have some extra work to do.
I call it mom guilt in that moment.
Yes. And so what is the decision? There's no clear answer to that. It's
Right.
not a rule.
Right.
It's a judgment, and you have to decide what you're going to do that works for you. And it sends a message both ways. If you tell your child, no, I can't sit down and watch the movie with you, then that has consequences. But if you don't pack lunches and you don't do your work or you don't take a shower, that has consequences as well. So they're never really straightforward.
That's why they're so confusing.
Right. They get really soft and really gray pretty fast.
Yeah. So interesting. So how do you know that as you're going through your life that you may need to start setting boundaries? What are some signs?
Well, we all need to set boundaries.
Okay.
So I think there would be some signs that you're not setting good boundaries if you start to feel resentful. So this is how it goes in my life. I started laughing when I thought about the fact that I was coming to give a boundary talk today because this has been something that I've struggled with my whole life. I think we all do.
Because it doesn't feel good to tell someone no.
Right. Some ways that you can know that you need to establish better boundaries is when you start to feel resentful.
Okay.
So what happens is when you give and give and give and you don't get your own bucket filled, then you end up feeling really empty, and then you start resenting all the people. All they do is take. All they do is need me. Don't these people ever do anything for themselves?
Oh, yeah.
Why does everyone suck me dry?
Yeah.
And so you get into this place that you're really resentful of the things that you're doing and what others are expecting from you.
Interesting.
But the truth is you teach people how to treat you.
Oh, can you expand on that?
Yeah. So if we think about it, you can only control your own behaviors. You can't control the behaviors of others around you. So it's all about what you say and what you do. So, for example, I am really, really good at pouring into other people. I'm a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
I can take care of everyone.
Right.
But that gets really exhausting after a time, and I don't do a very good job of asking for help. So this actually happened at our house last night. I was cooking dinner. I was making lunches. It's all that mom duty.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone was sitting around, and I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
I'm over here working, and you guys are all sitting around. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't anyone see that I need help?
And they don't.
Well, my husband said, all you have to do is ask.
That's true too. However, then there's the mental load comes in.
Right?
Yeah.
So but he was right.
Yeah.
If I had just said, hey, can you chop this? I need help unloading the groceries. I need this. I need that. Then that's a whole different conversation. But that's not what I did. I was in the kitchen cooking, doing all these things and becoming increasingly resentful
Right.
of the fact that no one was helping me when in fact they just didn't notice. Like it was just they were going on about their lives.
Well, and that's one thing that I've heard recently, and it struck a bell to me, was that no one's paying attention to your life.
Right. Yes,
you're the one who's paying attention to your own life, and that's about it.
Yeah, they were so caught up in the things that they were thinking about. I mean, everyone has their own journey that they're on and the things that they're worrying about, and they frankly weren't worrying that I was in the kitchen getting really frustrated. They had other things on their mind.
They had no idea.
Right.
Interesting. So resentfulness is one way that a poor boundary can manifest.
Right.
Are there other ways?
Yeah. So I think the other thing that you can start to feel is like, do you feel content? Do you feel like you're showing up as your best self? Do you feel like when you are doing something that it's where you want to be and that it is bringing out the best in you? So I think another clear example is when we are in a relationship or doing something where we feel judged or we feel uneasy or uncomfortable and that we start to be someone different. That may be that you are not setting boundaries around what you need, what you want to be doing,
right,
or how you want to be treated.
Yeah. Let me expand on that. If you are working with someone or maybe are living with someone or know someone who isn't treating you the way that you want to be treated and you try to set boundaries and they react.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an easy situation to navigate.
Right. It's a really difficult situation to navigate because, again, we teach people how to treat us. And when you change that, people like consistency. Like, whoa, you're showing up as someone different today.
Sure.
And people don't always like that. Many times they will change and be able to adapt to that. But no, when you change abruptly, people are like, no, this is not how our dynamic works.
Well, or maybe they just don't want to treat you that way. They enjoy the fact that they can walk all over you.
Yeah, I think I have a belief that people in general that we as humans are good. Like I really stick with that people show up in the best way they know how. But we all show up as our little wounded self.
Well, that's what I was going to say is whenever you are a mother, as soon as I became a mother, I looked at everybody in the whole world differently because you start off so innocent.
Right.
So you're right. I think you're right that everyone starts off with the kind heart.
Yep. That's what I think I think people show up. They want to be good people. I think there's really good inside of all of us.
Yeah.
But we get trauma and wounded along the way. And then that's where we show up from is that wounded place of kind of fixing our own needs, trying to figure out if we're worthy, like, are we good enough? And so when two people come together, both with their wounds, those may come together in a way that isn't healthy.
Yeah. And then communication is huge.
Communication. So trying to figure out what would you do if you weren't coming from that triggered or wounded place?
Right.
And recognizing that you may be playing off of that in the other person.
Well, and that's where the work comes in.
Yes.
Because you have to, first of all, realize these are your triggers. You have to realize where your trauma, what it has done to you. And then hopefully the person you're talking to has done some similar kind of work or else they're just, just full on reactionary all the time.
Yeah. So we totally have to understand what our own triggers are. And that's actually really, really hard work.
Oh, yeah.
So whatever you grow up with is the tapestry of your life. And you assume that that's what life should look like. So however you're parented is what you assume good parenting is. Whatever your relationship with friends are is what you assume good friends are. And it takes really thoughtful work to be able to disentangle that, to say, oh gosh, that wasn't a great style of parenting.
Yeah.
Or wait, I didn't get my needs met, or this doesn't work for me. And so to disentangle that and start to say, no, I need something different than that so that we don't repeat those patterns over and over again is both hard and incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, and you have to have the self-worth to say, I deserve better.
Yes, which goes back to that self-worth. We've talked about that several times. So I think that we're born with this innate being, like the fact that you are good enough just as you are.
Right.
Like that's all you need is you came into the world enough. But with all the pressures that are around us, we're soon taught that we're not enough. We need to achieve more. We need to do more. We need to give more. And so that's eroded away slowly. And then we show up every day being like, am I enough? Please tell me I'm enough.
You're just making me want to hug everybody I see right now. I'm just like, you wounded little thing, come here.
That's exactly. So you can find a lot of compassion if you recognize that everyone's walking away with it, or walking around with their wounds just,
at
dripping.
the surface. Yeah.
Because that's exactly what's happening. And if you can help not trigger those or help take care of those wounds, then people can show up differently.
Yeah.
And if you take care of other people's wounds too much, then you get into boundary issues because you're
Lord.
giving without
Lord.
taking. Right? It's a vicious circle.
Well, and I've been in therapy most of my life. I love therapy.
Oh, me too. Oh, you were my hero.
Oh, yeah. Well, who doesn't love to give someone money and let them talk about yourself for an hour? It's the best thing ever.
Good. Absolutely. We all need a therapist.
Yeah.
I say this all the
Oh,
time.
I love it. I tell everyone I'm like a broken record. My therapist tells me that you have a finite amount of empathy.
Yes.
You think that's true?
Yeah, because you get tapped out, right? Like you go and go and go and give and give and give. At some point, it ends, and so you have to use that empathy wisely.
Yeah, and you get burned out in the end.
You get burned out.
Well, let's see. What are some of the first steps someone should take when they realize they need to set boundaries? What are some steps?
Yeah. So I think knowing yourself, self-reflection is incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
So really taking some time to do a self-inventory to say, what's important to me?
Yeah.
What do I value? When am I the happiest? What drains me? What do I really like to do? What do I never want to do again? Who's important to me? Who do I really want to make sure that I make a priority? And so you get those things really clear for you. And then also spend some time exploring relationships and your understanding of what your childhood was like, what experiences have happened throughout your life that might have shaped you and what you think of those. And so I think really getting in touch with that is the first step to knowing what you want.
So either you can find a really good self-help workbook or a therapist.
Yes.
Or both.
Right. So, we could just say, just get a therapist and then everything
It's
is
not
better.
that easy for everybody, right?
Right. Yeah.
Money and whatnot. But so there are workbooks out there that do walk you through. It sounds like a who, what, when, where, why, how of your life.
Right.
Interesting. And how can individuals, this is hard because especially when it's like family or, close friends, honestly, anywhere.
Yep.
How do you communicate a boundary effectively?
Yeah. So I think family is probably the hardest.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, the way that you interact has been set for years and years and years. And just because you're on a journey to change that and may not be happy with the way it is doesn't mean that the other person is on that same journey.
Girl. That's all I'm going to give you is a deep
So I'm not one to go in and say, well, today I'm going to start doing things differently.
Yeah.
You just slowly start to do it. And I think awareness is the first step in that. So you don't necessarily have to change, but you have to name what's happening. So if you have an interaction and you didn't like it, or you go to an event and you come home and you're depleted, or something happens and you're like, wait, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
You just observe it.
Yeah.
And be really gentle with yourself, gentle with the situation, and just pay attention to what happened and what you're feeling. And then you start to notice patterns. And so again, you may not change immediately. You're just more aware of it. And then you can make informed choices as you move forward.
Yes.
The other way I like to do that is if you think about how you're going to say no to things. So that's a big one of how do we...
Well, that was actually my next question.
There we go. Look at that. Getting
Look
ahead
at
of
you.
myself.
No, don't get ahead of yourself. I love this. But you have to be assertive at times. And sometimes assertiveness can look like aggression to some people.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that?
Right. Especially as women. We are not taught to be assertive. And even more so in the South. We are taught to be kind and don't ruffle feathers and polite. Those are values that society puts upon us. And so when we are aggressive or assertive or state our needs, people don't always know what to do with that. And then that feels really bad on the inside of us because pleasing feels really good.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you make someone happy, you're like, yes, that felt good. But then there may be longer term consequences. So if you need to say no, I think the first step again is really thinking about what do I want? And I remember my therapist gave me this exercise and she said, Micah, the real exercise is that you would say no to everything that's asked of you for a week. And she said, but that's far too advanced for you. See, right? Like I can't even get
people pleaser.
Right? I can't even get the right exercise. She was like, I want you to just be aware when someone asks something of you. If it was in the name of self-care, what would you do?
Oh, interesting.
You can still say yes, but I want you to be aware of what, if you did it in the name of self-care, what your answer would be. That was really eye-opening for me because then I had to stop and say, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Is this because I want to do it? Is this because it makes me feel good? Or am I doing it out of guilt or obligation? And so I did that for a long time. And that really helped me start to understand a little bit more about myself, about what was important to me, the things that I really wanted to pour into.
This is what I love about therapists. You know, it seems like a simple thing, but it is earth-shattering because I'm like thinking about it just this couple of instances last week. For instance, last week was a very busy week for me. I was dead tired. I work at 4 a.m. I get real tired.
Yep.
And my son had something at school, and I didn't have to go. And I was on my way there, and I was so tired, and I said, why am I doing this? I really need sleep. And so I didn't go. And the guilt went away because I needed it for self-care.
Yes.
And that sneaky little therapist thing, like you just, if every decision you made, you thought that's so sneaky. I love it.
And think about what you did for your son. You taught him that taking care of yourself is okay.
Yeah.
And I got the best reward on that recently. So my daughter had a game and it started at 7:30 and I too am an early bird. And so evenings are really hard for me.
They're so hard.
And I had guilt that I was not going to be able, that the game, everybody was worried. Like, I'm not going to be able to do this.
And
my daughter,
think I don't care.
My daughter looked at me and said, Mom, you don't have to go. I have a million games. This is way past your bedtime.
Aww.
Like, stay home. It's okay. And it was this moment that I recognized that I was teaching her that self-care was important. And so I'm not continuing the cycle of you can't take care of yourself and you have to give.
Love that. So let's say you put a boundary out there, and you do it as nicely as you can, but it's still a boundary. It's been placed. Yeah. How do you handle someone who pushes back on that boundary?
Yeah. So again, we can't change other people's behavior. And that's where we have to come from our own place of knowing that we're enough and that we're enough just as we are. We don't have to earn their approval. We don't have to please them. But it's really about being okay with who we are. And so they may push back, but I often say people teach you who they are. When they do, believe them. Right? Believe them. They're showing you something, and then you get to make a decision about whether that fits in your life or not.
Which is hard when it's family.
It's really hard.
Yeah, or
really,
like anybody,
hard.
really. But, I've had a few instances in my life where I've had to cut people out. And that is the hardest thing for a people pleaser to do.
So that's a really strict boundary, right? So that is a boundary of I can't find a way for you to be in my life and it be healthy for me. So the boundary is you can't be in my life. On the other side of that, there's the boundary of you can just take it from me and you can do, our relationship is whatever you want it to be. And so the goal is for somewhere in between there.
Sure.
Of how can you be in my life and it still be work for me and that I still am able to take care of myself and be my best self.
Yeah. Hopefully when you do something like that to someone who's pushing back, and they will notice the fact that you're taking care of yourself. But again, it requires the person that you're doing this to do some self-work, which not everybody is capable of.
Right.
Well, they're all capable of, but they're not willing to do it.
Maybe their wounds are so deep that they're not able to go there. Or maybe they are doing work and they just haven't gotten to the place that they can take care of others. Again, they're on their own journey and fighting their own battles.
Yeah.
But that's for them to figure out because your job is to take care of you and to make sure that you stay true to the things that you need to be a whole person.
So let's talk about the differences in boundaries when it comes to personal relationships versus professional settings. Okay.
Yes.
So what are general attitudes towards boundaries, time off, not answering calls with work?
Yeah. I mean, and how do you balance both of those?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, of how do you have boundaries in your personal life and boundaries at work, but be fulfilled by both?
Yes.
Constantly struggling with this. That would, again, every day, this feels like the balance. So work will take. I think about that all the time, especially if you work for a big company. I work in a hospital. Hospitals have been going for years and years and years. They're big organizations. They run 365 days a year, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like, that's really easy to get pulled into. You could work all the time if you wanted to. And it's life or death.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Gosh.
the stakes are really, really high.
Yeah.
So figuring out how you show up, you do the things that you need to do and take care of the things you do, but also still take care of yourself, is a really delicate balance. And so I think it's really important to have clarity on expectations and have conversations around that. You also have to be your own advocate. So if you have vacation time, it's your responsibility to take it, right? Like, it is so easy to say, well, I don't have to do that. Well, I can show up for this. Well, I can do more and more and more. But the only person that's really going to take care of you is you.
Yeah.
And if you don't do those things, in the end, you're not going to be good because you're going to burn out and you won't be able to show up in the way that you need to.
And what does burnout look like?
Yeah, so I think burnout goes back to that word of resentment. You lose the joy in things. You start to dread. If it's burnout at work, you start to dread going. You're not as highly functional. You get more irritable. So it's really just losing that passion. Again, not showing up in the way that you would want to show up, and just having that blah feeling about it.
Yeah. And then what are some ways to combat burnout?
Yeah, so I think combating burnout is about taking care of yourself. Like, this all goes back to self-care and how do we really show up every day in a way that's healthy. The things I think of are do you eat lunch every day?
Oh, yeah. I don't miss a meal.
I eat lunch in front of my computer, while taking a meeting or writing emails. But relationships and connecting with others is incredibly important. And meal times can be a really important thing, or a really important time to do that.
It's one of the best times.
Right. So I encourage people, step away from your computer.
Yeah.
Go have a meal with someone. Go out and connect. Take a
So
walk in the
easy.
middle of the day, right? But we forget all of these things. So it's really about finding balance in your life every single day. I think we get really stuck on rigid boundaries of, okay, I'm on vacation, I'm going to protect this, I'm not going to have my phone, I'm not going to do any work. Or when I'm home, I do this, and when I'm at work, I do this. I don't know if there's a perfect work-life balance, but it's about self-care in everything that you do.
Yeah.
So be it eating lunch in the middle of the day, going on a walk, standing up, stopping in the hallway to say, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing? And having that human connection.
Yeah.
I think it's about taking care of yourself in every single thing you do throughout the day. It's not about, okay, now just put this in this compartment and put this in this compartment.
Right.
I think it's about meshing it all together and being very, very mindful about what you're doing.
Okay. So those are boundaries at work. How about romantic relationships?
Yeah. So again, wounded souls coming together is what I think about this. So whatever you experienced as a childhood is encoded in you as what's a normal relationship. And so everyone's going to come into the relationship with their own baggage. And so it's incredibly important to think about that and to learn about the other person and know where they come from.
Okay. Let's say you have a very controlling person. I mean, basically, you're in a bad relationship, in a romantic relationship, when it starts to not feel good, right? So that's how you would know that your boundaries need some help. In a romantic relationship.
Again, I think it comes back to when you start to feel depleted and you feel like your needs aren't being met. And so it's important, one, about knowing what you need, and two, about asking for that, right?
Okay.
So you need to state it, you need to know what it is, and then you need to clearly state what's going on. And then again, I do think this is where a therapist comes in, where it can be really helpful, where you're able to sort through that of what is your own trigger, because there are the biggest fights in my own relationship come when I'm coming from a place of being triggered. It's not actually what my husband is doing, but rather it's my own wound. And so really making sure that I know those, and that when a conflict is happening, that I know what's my junk and what's his junk, and that we're able to come together and have a conversation around that.
Okay, I love that. All right. Once boundaries are set, how can someone assure that they are maintained over time?
Yeah, well, I think that boundaries are fluid because what I need today is not going to be what I need tomorrow and is certainly not going to be what I need in 10 years.
Sure.
So I think that we have to assess continually about what the boundary is and set them. And it may be like right now, I've had a lot going on at work. And so I have less to give and I've had to set tighter boundaries around my time and my attention. And then there's other seasons of life where I have a ton to give. And so I can be a little bit more thoughtful about pouring into others and not needing as much. So I think that it kind of flexes with your own season in life, what you've got going on and what the others around you need. And at some points in your life, one person may need more. Like if you have aging parents, like they might need more. Or when you have kids at home, they need more. And you just have less to give versus when you don't. In
your 20s?
Yeah, exactly. You have a lot more to give in your 20s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and employers love that.
And we didn't even know. Like when I look back.
I know. Oh, my God,
I had no idea.
Yeah. I'm like, my life was so easy back then.
Yes.
And yet everything was so important, and yet it wasn't, you know?
Yes.
It's funny how you grow. Some people won't take no for an answer. Mm-hmm. How do you know it's time to cut that person off?
Yeah, again, people show you their true colors, believe them. And so you do what you need. And if you're really saying what you need, I think that they'll self-select. If they don't take no for an answer and you continue to set your boundary, that's not going to be comfortable for them. And I think eventually they self-select as long as you hold your boundary.
Okay.
And again, what's hard for us about saying no is what it triggers inside of us. We feel guilty. We feel shame. We feel like we're not doing enough. So really staying in touch of what that triggers for you and giving yourself self-compassion of, oh, wait, no, that was okay for me to do that. I'm just taking care of myself. So if you don't let those things get triggered inside of you, or when they do, you take care of yourself, then it doesn't matter if they don't take no, because you know where you are and you're enough just as you are.
That is very profound. Last question. If there is one key takeaway that you want people to remember about boundaries, what is that takeaway?
Yeah, I think the takeaway is that you matter. You are important enough to take care of. You are just as you are. You're enough just as you are. And so you don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to take care of others to be enough. You just are. And so if you can remember that, I think everything else falls into place.
Wow. That's very hard to... That requires therapy for a lot of people.
It does.
Find a therapist.
That's our real takeaway message. But it is really hard, especially in the age of social media, TV, like all of the images that we see. I think about this when I'm going through, like if I'm on Facebook, well, my vacation isn't good enough. I haven't traveled enough. Wait, I don't have the right clothing.
Right.
So then I'll get off of that and I'll get on LinkedIn. Wait, my position is not big enough. I haven't given enough speeches. I haven't done enough podcasts. Like we're constantly inundated by messages of what we should be and what, is celebrated and what makes you enough. And you really have to stop and say, wait, no, none of those things matter.
That's right. It's kind of reassuring to know that you, as a psychiatrist, as a person trained in this field, still struggles with the same things we're struggling with. You still don't think at times that you're enough, and you're like, wait a minute, no. I've been trained. I know this.
Yes, I say that all the time. If I'm struggling with this and have extensive training in this, how does the rest of the world know this?
Yeah.
How do we figure this out? How do we go through life with these things? So I think that is a good clue that we're all struggling. We're all having this. We're all showing up as our little wounded selves.
Yeah.
And we have to take care of each other, be kind, be patient, give grace, have compassion.
Wow, I feel like I just had a therapy session. That was really thought-provoking. But in the end, it just comes down to self-care and knowing what you as an individual need for self-care. And let me tell you, therapy is the best thing I have ever done for myself, so I highly recommend it. To share your thoughts on this episode or to send me a question for a future episode, go to WRALFM.com/SarahHasQuestions. The link is also in the show notes. And guys, this is our last episode for season 2. It's been such a great season. But don't worry, we'll be back in the fall with more episodes. But let's do some credits so you know who works behind the scenes. This podcast is a production of Capital Broadcasting Company. I'm your host, Sarah King. Graham Hill is our studio producer. Ashley Pearson and Joe Restino handle social media for the podcast. Our producer, who is incredible, is Anita Normanley. Thanks to Amy Hutchinson, Megan Dew, and Samantha Boyette at WakeMed, along with all the doctors who kindly answered all my questions. Have a great summer. See you in the fall. And as always, thanks for listening.